And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara Podcast. Here's Jeff.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Saturday Night Live Stream. And we are here. Excuse me, I had some phlegm in my throat. All right, so we are here. It's Saturday night, and we're going to have two guests tonight that are previous guests. So I hope you guys really enjoy this. One will be Zachary.Price, and the other one will be Toni Riley. If you want to see about them below, what you can see is a link to the video I did with Zach and the link I did to the video with Toni. All right, so we are here. We are ready to go. Zachary's here. I can see he's in the chat. So let's bring him in and see what he's up to.
Hello.
Zachary, are you there?
I am. Let me get that.
All right, so there he is. All right, welcome, Zachary. Great to see you again.
Thank you.
Great to see you. So for those of you that don't know, Zachary was on, I guess, about 2 weeks ago?
A week or two ago, yeah.
Was a week or two ago, and we talked about his NDE, and then afterwards on the air, we were talking about that Zachary has retranslated the Lord's Prayer, and I thought it was fascinating. I thought it would be great to talk about. One thing real quick though, Zach, is your camera's kind of blurry or something. I mean, I feel like maybe you need to wipe the lens, or your light's too bright or something. You don't have to fix it.
I think it may be my. Hang on just a
That's
second.
better. I think that's much better already.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I had to. Oh, okay. I guess I had to. Something was on my camera.
Mm-hmm.
Is that better?
Yes, it is. All right. So for those of you that didn't see it, you should definitely check out the NDE that I did with Zach. Do you want to give him like maybe just like a quick 5-minute reminder or a 5-minute preview of what we talked about, your NDE and what you saw?
Sure.
Just something real quick for those that didn't see it, and maybe it'll have them want to watch.
Sure. Well, there's some things I didn't talk about actually that I can share tonight.
Oh, great.
Well, so and it's just the kind of details that happened right before the accident happened.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, before I get into this, I'd just like to make clear that my NDE my experience, literally, there are no words for it. You can't really articulate it. But it's taken me about 26 years to finally, for the memories of that NDE to resurface, and also for me to be able to acquire the appropriate language to be able to at least point to what I experienced. So it was February 12th, 1998. I was in the 6th grade, and my sister, who's 2 years younger than me, she was in the 4th grade. And my mother was taking both my sister and I to school, and we were running late. We were running very late. And on that day, my sister still being in elementary school, you know how elementary schoolers during Valentine's Day, like all the each of the kids in all the classes will they'll get Valentine's Day cards, and they'll give them out to all their friends and classmates. You know what I'm talking about? Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
good old days.
So that's what she would do. So that's what she had Valentine's Day cards, but she had forgotten them at the house. And we were speeding, and she brought this up to Mom, and then it triggered in my head that I had also forgotten my homework that I did the night before. So we both told my mother this at the same time, and when she turned around to go home, to go back to get the stuff, she lost control of the car, and and when she, I remember hearing tires skidding, and then everything kind of went black. I told you during our last interview that I remember us starting to speed, and then it went black.
Hmm.
But I didn't feel like it was really relevant to the story and what I
Sure.
was trying to talk about. But
Hmm.
anyway, so it all went black, and then I remember being aware of this indescribable beauty. It was first of all, everything went black, and then and I remember experiencing. It was almost like there was no time. There was no. There was everything was happening at once, and there was this beauty unlike anything I've ever experienced before in my life. Um, there was it was a beauty without any particular shape or form or anything that you could call beautiful. It was just the essence of it. Well, it was more than just beauty. It was the purest form of what beauty is. It was the essence of beauty, and I've since come to call it the quintessence of beauty. Um, but So it was almost like I said, there was no difference there in what I experienced. There was no separation. Um, there was no there was no subject, and then there was no object. There was no object, and there was no verb. So what was happening was not different from what it was. And then also there was a knowing, unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. Um, I guess the main point was that there was no difference. I understood that I was what was happening, and like I said, I could distinguish between what I was and what I was experiencing. Um, as I said, there are literally no words to describe it. And since my accident, since my near-death experience, I have since come to find out that what I experienced is what is referred to in all of the great religious traditions as the I am, the I am presence. That's what it was. It was literally it was you couldn't it's indescribable and you can't really define it, but it was literally the face of God that I was experiencing. I was looking dead into the face of God, and in the podcast I talk in the last podcast we when we did a week or two ago, I talked about I guess for me the near death experience really wasn't what was important. What was important was what I brought back with me, and it was um, this intuitive understanding that I am everything that I experience is that's the wrong word. Well, I gave a lot of analogies during the last time we had when we had our the interview you gave. So I talked a lot about um, but as I said, the I am that is talked about in all the great religious traditions of the world. For instance, in Judeo Christianity, the story of Moses. This is the example I gave last time. In the story, Moses. I think everyone who's relatively familiar with the Bible has heard the story of Moses. He goes to the mountain. He's like herding sheep. He loses his sheep, and he tries to find the sheep, and he encounters this burning bush, this bush that's on fire, but the fire isn't consuming the bush. And the bush says, go set your people free, go set my people free. And Moses says, sure, of course I will, but who do I say sent me? And the bush says, he said, who I say sent me, what is your name? Who has the authority to do this? And the bush says, I am that I am. That is my name now and for all future generations. And so that is God's name, is the I am. And it's interesting to me that no matter who you are, no matter what language you speak, no matter where you're from, no matter what you believe, we all identify ourselves as I am. Like I before when we first met, I introduced myself as, "Hi, I am Zach," and you said, "Hi, I am Jeff." That was our first introduction, and that's what happens when anyone meets anyone else. That we are actually saying the name of God before we even say our own name. And the analogies I gave during our last conversation were, I think the first one I gave was, I talked about the largest organism on the planet. Uh, and there are actually two organisms that operate this way, and they're both in America. The largest organism that I'm going to refer to is the aspen forest. But the other organism is it's this huge expanse of fungus and like mushrooms and they're all they're all connected together. But the aspen forest, what's unique about the aspen forest, similar to the fungus, is they did some studies on this forest, and if you walk around in the forest, you see, oh, there's a tree, there's a tree, there's a tree, there's a tree. You see all these different trees everywhere, and this huge forest in Colorado. But as it turns out, they've done some studies on this, and if you dig down into the earth to the root system, not only do the roots intertwine, but it's actually only one tree. It is one plant, one organism expressing itself in millions of different ways at one time. And so it is one being, manifesting in countless different ways at one time. And it's kind of what we are. We are individual expressions of this I am awareness. And like I said, it's spoken about in all the great religious traditions. And so that's what we talked about. That we talked about.
I think bamboo is also like that. Bamboo trees.
It does, yeah. It's bamboo. Yeah, that's another analogy I'll use sometimes. It just keeps growing, right? And so that's a great point. Yeah.
I know I have a personal story. I'm not going to tell the story, but I just know about that because I planted bamboo and it went crazy, and we had to put a stop to it.
Yeah.
So, and I know how that is. Well, I brought you here tonight because you retranslated the Lord's Prayer, which many people know, but you went and took it directly from Aramaic to English, which I don't know how many translations has it gone through to what we have now.
Well, I didn't retranslate it. What I did is I'm going to share with you as close as we can get the what the Aramaic version is actually saying. I'll share that with the audience.
Right.
And then I will share. I have about 16 different versions of the Lord's Prayer because it's a part of my graduate thesis that I'm currently in the process of writing at the moment. I'll be done with it in about a month. My master's thesis is on the Lord's Prayer and from the original Aramaic and how it can influence and how it can affect people who are in palliative care. And so I'm measuring how it affects their degree of suffering. So if it lowers it, right?
Let me ask you this. So I always thought that Aramaic wasn't a written language. If that's true or not, how are you translating it?
I don't know whether, I believe it was a written language. It's still spoken today. It's spoken in Syria and Iran, around that area. There are only a few communities that still speak it. But I know that it was, before it was translated into Greek, it was first written down in Aramaic, from what I understand, right? And there is when I first really started doing my research, I worked with he's a world-renowned Aramaic scholar, and I'm going to give you the translation that I worked with him on so that I could share. But he's like one of the leading Aramaic scholars in the world.
And for those that don't know, because I don't even know the full regular traditional version, and there may be some people that don't know even what we're
Yep.
talking about. But the traditional one is like Our Father.
Yeah. So if so that's the King James version, right? Our Father. And I
Mhm.
think most people have heard, that's actually the most well-known prayer in Christendom, is the Our Father prayer. And that prayer goes like this. And Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Now, that was from the King James Bible. And that is, we don't know exactly how many translations it went through from the Aramaic, but we do know that it went through at least 4, probably more than that. So the first 2, when we don't know that it actually went through these 2 languages, like right after the other, but we do know that it was originally spoken in Aramaic, which is an Afro-Asiatic language. And Aramaic there's only, like I said earlier, there are only just a few cultures that still speak it today. There are just a few places in the Middle East that still speak it. I think there's a church in Lebanon where they use it a lot. But so so if you were to go back to the original language and you were to you were listening to Jesus actually speak this prayer to his disciples, if you were teaching it to his disciples, what you would have actually heard, the words you would have heard would be this. Habun de Bushmaya, Neskadashma, Tete Malkusak, Nehwe Sefyanak, Aikana de Bushmaya, Afbarahach, Havlanakma Sunkanan Yamana, Washboklan Chalben, Waktehain, Aikana Dafkanan Spokan Chayabin, Wela Telan de Tsuna, Elan Patsan min Bisha, Metol Telaki, Markutha Wahili Watishbuta, Lalam Almin, Amen. So if you were there listening to him teach it to his disciples, that's what you would have heard. But if you, and so that's where the King James Version came from. But as far as we know, it went, like I said, it went through at least 4 translations to get to the King James. And so the first 2 languages, so that was Aramaic that I spoke for you. And then it went into the Greek. We believe, scholars believe that the route it took. But Aramaic and Greek are 2 completely different families of languages. They have nothing in common with each other. So they had to translate as close as they could what the Aramaic said into the Greek. So there are no cognates or anything that they share. There are no common words at all. And a lot of languages have common words because they're related in some way, but those 2 are different. But if you were to translate what I just spoke for you directly into modern English, and you don't go through all the rest of the translations and get it diluted, right? What that translates to directly, as close as we can get it, is this. Oh, birthing, fathering, mothering of the cosmos, source of all that breathes and moves, focus your light within us. Make it useful. May your creative breath erase the divide of our perceived separation and unify us in the present moment. Help us to love beyond our ideals and sprout acts of compassion for all living creatures. Endow us with the wisdom to produce and share what each of us needs to grow and flourish. Untie the tangled threads of our judgments as we release others from the entanglements of past mistakes. Do not let us digress from our true purpose, but may we be ever aware. You are, wait, that's not right. Let me back up. Do not let us digress from our true purpose, but may we be ever aware. Out of you, the animating principle of life, may we take part in the continuing process of renewal, sealed in trust, truth, and faith, and may this be so. Amen. So that was as close as we can get it into translated directly into modern English. But then like I said, I studied that, and then I've also studied, I have about 16 other different versions that I've been using in my graduate work. And I've compiled a little bit longer, more fleshed out version from the Aramaic, and also filter, into the modern vernacular of, and this isn't directly translated, this is a version of that, but I found it extremely useful in the clinical setting where I work with a lot of patients. And the thing that I found with this prayer is both of these versions, that version I just spoke for you, and then the version I'm about to share with you, is that I've not met a single person, and I've worked with atheists, agnostics, people from all backgrounds, all traditions, and no traditions, right? Like the atheists and agnostics. And it resonated with all of them, because the essence of this prayer, both the prayer the version I just spoke for you, and the prayer I'm about to share with you, it talks about what it means to be alive. It doesn't talk about bowing down to someone or guilt, shame, or punishment. It talks about, embodying, the best version of yourself and what it means to be alive. So the version that I shared with you earlier, and then that I use mostly in the hospital is this. Source of all sustenance and life, carve out a space within our hearts wherein your presence may abide. Breathe into us the life of you so that we are inspired. Increase in us the strength of you so that we may be empowered on our mission. Endow in us the wisdom to produce and share what each of us needs to grow and flourish. Untie the tangled threads of our judgments as we release others from the entanglements of past mistakes. Do not let us digress from our true purpose, but may we be ever aware. You are power, fulfillment, and wholeness itself, as the illusion of our separation is dissolved, and we are made whole once again and for all time, sealed in trust, truth, and faith, and may this be so. Amen. So that is the version that I use a lot. Like I said, that's a version, that's not a direct translation, but it's taken from, I've arrived at that after working with all the different versions and the original.
Did they use the word amen?
Mm-hmm. And they did. Yes, they did.
Is
amen.
Is that an Aramaic word? Amen.
That is an Aramaic, but it's not pronounced amen. It's pronounced amen. So the end of the prayer that I spoke for you, I said amen. That's actually what the word translates, or that's what it sounds like in Aramaic.
What does amen or amen mean?
It means and may this be so, and so it is, or let this be so. I believe it was also used in legal documents, if I'm not mistaken, way back in the day. So it closes like like a a supplication or anything that is. I believe that
It kind
it
of
was
like
used in
seals
legal
the
language.
deal or something.
Seals the deal. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be another way to say it. Or yeah,
So
yeah,
let it.
or
So it's been spoken. So it is so.
it is so. That's exactly that's what it means. It is so. Let it be. Yeah.
Hmm. It's amazing to think about that there are parts of the Bible that Jesus, I believe, is directly speaking, which is in red text in some Bibles.
Depends on which one. Yeah.
If they had the original Aramaic, if they had what he said originally in Aramaic on those parts too, and then retranslate those, how those would turn out.
Hmm.
Do they
Yeah.
have those in Aramaic somewhere, what he said in the Bible?
Uh, I don't know. I know that there's a guy that I didn't work with him because he passed away, from what I understand, a long time ago. But he's like one of the preeminent Aramaic scholars. His name was George Lamsa, and there is a Lamsa Bible and he spoke Aramaic, and so he translated the entire Bible from Aramaic.
Hmm.
Um, and it's similar, but there are a lot of um, noticeable differences if you really look at it.
Let me interrupt
But
you
I
I'm so sorry. Let me interrupt you real quick because I forgot to do this. If you guys have any questions for Zach, put it in the chat so I can kind of ask that as we go along. And I think there's a question for you already.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Did
could.
the Aramaic use separate words for those, or did they have a single word that encompassed both genders?
Uh,
And thank you, Petey Pete.
mhm. um, the first word abun, for instance, uh, does not it doesn't translate directly. It's often translated as our father, but if you notice, when I translated, uh, when I did the first translation, um, or the translation actually, the second one I did was a version. Um, I didn't say our father. Uh,
And I think,
abun.
well, also, let me
Mhm,
add this because I forgot to add it. I think he's also referring to when he said mothering and fathering.
right, right. So it's not so abun. That very beginning, it is. Uh, it's also where we get the word that not necessarily the word abun, but they come from the same root where we get the word breath, right? So it's breathing, right? It's boo. So it's you can feel it. You can actually sense that when you say the word. So it's breathing, right? It's talking about the breath of life. So no, it wasn't talking about gender per se. I think that's something that was added on later on. So they didn't refer to God as Father. It was just the essence of life and being grateful for the source of all that exists. So I guess that's what that. I hope that answers this question. Does it?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, um, yeah, but they had genders. Yeah, they did have genders. They do have genders in that language. There's male and female, of course. Yeah. But in the Bible, some interesting things that I don't know if
By
your
the way,
audience may have.
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but someone would like a copy of what you said. Are you up to making that available?
I have copies already available.
All right.
So what would they like? Which would they like the direct translation? Would
I
they
just
like my
say
version of it?
all it says is there a way to get a copy of that?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can hmm, tell them to if they could email you, or how could I get their email contact? I could email it to them.
Or you can give out yours, and they
I can give
can.
out. Sure,
I've
my
actually.
email.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I actually put your email in the description, zackary.david.price at icloud.com.
Yes, and it's Zackary with a K. Zack Zachary with a K.
Right.
because a lot of people spell it with an H.
Right.
But so anyone who's interested, I can send you a copy. Yeah.
Now, here's another question, and we kind of talked about this last time, and someone else must have picked up on it as well. Do you know where the word "amen" originated? I seem to recall that Billy Carson had some information on how the word originated from a possible ET that was an Egyptian god.
Okay, so the the god, the pharaoh that you were probably referring to is, and this is what we talked about. His name. Um, so there's a god named Amen. Okay, I believe. But the pharaoh you're referring to, his name was Akhenaten. And if you haven't heard that name before, I know you've heard of his son. His son was King Tut. Akhenaten was King Tut's father. They figured this out, and King Tut's mother was Nefertiti. And what happened was Akhenaten, he eradicated all the gods, all the pantheon of gods in Egypt, and he actually destroyed all their temples and everything. And he said that there's only one God, and it is the Aten, and I am his son. Sound familiar? So I don't know if that's he was ET. I've heard that before, but and a lot of people say that, and it's fun to talk about. It's fun to speculate about that. But from what we know, he was King Tut's father, and he was known as a rebel pharaoh, because he got rid of the status quo and the way they practiced religion, and everyone was kind of forced to worship Aten. And
Would you say that he is the one that brought in monotheism?
okay, so yes, scholars believe that he was the first monotheist in history. And there is some debate, and actually Sigmund Freud wrote a book on this, that Akhenaten was actually the historical Moses. That's kind of a conspiracy theory, but Freud wrote a book on it. So
I think Billy
there's
Carson
that.
also says that.
Yeah. So we don't really know exactly, but those are that's what's out there, and they've never found. I don't believe they've ever found Akhenaten's tomb. It took them forever to find King Tut's tomb. They found it like in the 40s, I believe. And like that's actually one of my favorite stories is the finding of that tomb.
I think you can go through Egypt today and still see evidence of other gods, statues and stuff defaced from the time of Akhenaten.
And then they also after Akhenaten was, I believe he was killed. I believe he ended up being assassinated. And he married his sister, one of his sisters, I believe. And so that's part of the reason that King Tut was so deformed. Tutankhamun was so deformed. And King Tut's original name was not King Tutankhamun. I believe it was Tutankhaten, because he was coming after Aten, right? So, but if you notice that if he had the first name, if he would have stuck with his first name, it wouldn't have been Tutankhamun or Tutankhamun. It would have been Tutankhaten, which would have been after Aten, right? But Tutankhamun they changed his name to be more in alignment with the religion they wanted him to be a part of, like the upper echelons of Egypt wanted to be a part of, and they were following Amun. So, which is close to Amen, right? But yeah, something, I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, but most people that I've found have not. But you're familiar with the story of Genesis, right? In the
Right.
Bible?
Hmm.
Okay. So God creates Adam, and he, uh, eventually, Adam is like lonely and everything. And uh, God, puts him to sleep according to the myth, and um, and he takes out a rib, and like that's how Eve comes about, right? But nowhere in the Bible, after God, according to the story, puts Adam to sleep, not once in the Bible does it ever say he woke up. So for those who are really go on a lot of deep dives for these types of things, what we are actually experiencing right now is happening within the mind of God, or within the dream of the Son of God, which is an interesting way to kind of come at that story and the entire biblical corpus. Um, so I think that's interesting. Um,
So are you saying that perhaps what we're living in is a dream, or the dream of God?
mhm. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's supported by Scripture. So
What other
it's just
scriptures?
assumed
What other scripture supports that?
the entire Bible. If if Adam never woke up, then we're we are different versions of the same God, and the different versions of the Son of God, right? Happening within the creation of God. So I think that's interesting to think about.
Yeah, that
And
is.
there are scriptures out there that talk about this, like a Course in Miracles talks about this, that this is a dream. The Vedic religions, uh, they talk about this. This is a dream. This is Maya. And everything is happening within consciousness. And that's something else I shared last time we were when we interviewed. I read you something I had written, and it was like I used my logic to talk about the I am, which is what I've gotten to so far. After and it supports my NDE. So, but yeah, I've been starting to get some emails, so thanks for that.
That's
I'll
great.
get them sent out soon.
It would be it's interesting to think about it. If imagine if you were God and you wanted to divide yourself into billions of people that had their own egos and were completely separate of you, and maybe even didn't even believe you exist. You,
Hmm.
that's kind of like what we're saying, as if it, I think, in reference to God.
We're getting so caught up in. Hmm. And there's an acronym that I use a lot with. I've used this with patients that I've worked with. EGO is an acronym. EGO stands for edging God out.
Mm.
Have you heard that before?
Mm-mm.
No. Well, what it is like it's forgetting the state of wholeness that is our natural state, the origin of what we are. It's putting that to the side and deciding to live in the dream of separation. Because in reality, like another word I'll share with you that I shared in our last podcast is the word holy. It comes from the Old English word halig, Halig, and that's the same root from where we get the word whole or complete. And that's also the same root from where we get the word heal. And so what we are living in right now is a state of separation. And that, talking about another word, the belief in that separation. Okay, so we have the word sin, right? And we think sin is like, doing wrong things and making mistakes and all that. But sin actually is not a religious word. It's actually, it is now, but it originally wasn't a religious word. It was originally an archery term, and it's still an archery term. If you shoot an arrow at a bullseye and you miss the bullseye, uh, you've sinned. That's what that means. You've heard the phrase missing the mark. Well, that's what sin means. It means, And so if you're shooting arrows and practicing archery, and you miss the mark, when people sin normally in life, in the traditional sense of the word, they always beat themselves up like, oh God, I'm terrible. I'm an unworthy person. I'm a bad person, But if you're practicing archery, you go up and you pull the arrow out and you try again and you try again and you try again until you get it right. And so sin doesn't have to be something that we beat ourselves up for. It can be a learning mechanism to help us to become better people. You know, um, and so belief in that separation, there's nothing wrong with it, because it's the condition, it's the human condition that we're in, right? That we believe in, we live in separate, there's a reality of duality, or at least a level of reality of duality. And so moving from that place of separation to a place of wholeness, that is the root word halig. The word that comes from that is healing, right? That's one of the words I said comes from halig, right? So the process of getting from the place of separation to a place of wholeness, that is the activity of healing. That's the verb of healing. And then the end result of that is wholeness, or being whole. So getting from separation to unity, that is the process of healing. And so when Jesus healed people, right, he never said, I'm healing you. He said, you are made whole. I'm not saying he did anything to them. What he was doing was opening their eyes to see the reality that you were never broken to begin with. I want you to see the eternal reality of wholeness that exists right now. And so what he would do is he would help people to realize that, and through that realization, experience of him and their faith in him, they were able to realize that. And so that the existing as whole in the finite realm, the realm with beginnings and endings that we live in now, that is wholeness. But in the eternal realm, the realm without beginnings and endings, that is existed as holy. I mean, that is expressed as the holy. And so one is in the eternal realm and one is in the finite realm. So I think that's interesting. And I play with words a lot. So
I think that Jesus said, or at least what people commonly believe, is that the kingdom of heaven is within.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, he did.
I don't know if that's mistranslated as well or not, but that makes sense. How you could make someone become whole if they can experience the kingdom of heaven from
you
within.
Can experience the wholeness that exists, that is behind our perceived reality of separation. It's always there. That wholeness is always there. So it's kind of like a movie screen, right? So if you go to like if you take your kids to see a movie or something, right? And they have all this separation, all this action is happening on the screen, right? And like there would be no action unless there were separation. And unless there were perceived separation, nothing could happen, like in the way that we understand it, right? But in all that separation and all that activity on the screen that you're seeing, it wouldn't be happening unless there was a whole, complete, unchanging reality of the screen that activity was happening on. Does that make sense? So there is this reality of unity and completion that is behind every activity, every perceived separation, and judgment and everything. There's an unchanging reality that's behind all of that. There was a Swami, an enlightened master who lived, I think, in the 20th century. And he was once asked by one of his disciples, what is real? And he said, he stopped, he thought about it for a minute, and he looked back at his disciple and he said, that is real, which does not change. And so whatever changes has no inherent reality of its own. It is an expression of something with greater reality that it is supported by. And so, and that actually validates what I've experienced in my near-death experience, which, like I said, my near-death experience was different than I think of anyone's I've ever heard. And it was a lot simpler. There wasn't like a lot of, you know, fireworks and seeing all these people and everything. It was just a realization, I am that. And, but
I was just thinking maybe during your NDE you were made whole.
I think I witnessed the reality that I was whole, and that I'm still whole right now, and that you were whole too, Jeff. But we have these experiences that we're not. But one day we will wake up, and in Psalms it says, "Is it not written?" And Jesus also said this, when he was accused of blaspheming, he said, "Is it not written in your law that I have said ye are gods?" And that's stated all in different places throughout the Bible. That there's another one. Be still and know that I am God. Jesus never once said Jesus was God. What Jesus said was the I am present, right? What he said is I am God, right? He didn't say Jesus was God.
That's perfect that you said, because I just got a question and that says, ask your guest if he believes in Jesus Christ. Ask him if Jesus was God in the flesh. I think that's what you're kind of answering.
Yeah. Well, Jesus, just like all of us. So another example I talked about in our last interview was the waves in the ocean. So, imagine you have this vast ocean, and and one day a wave arises on this ocean, and the wave travels all the way across the ocean, and one day travels for days and days and days, and one day this wave crashes on the shore, and then so we could say when that wave arose on the ocean, we could call that a birth. As it traveled across the ocean, we could call that a life. And when it crashed on the shore, we could call that a death. And there were also all these other waves up too that seemed to be separate waves, right? And there's we had all these different waves, but we're focused on this one wave. But there were all these other waves too on the ocean, and they're all crashing on the shore. But if we think about it, there's the birth and the death of the wave, right? That was just the wave, but all the wave is entirely water, just as the ocean is entirely water. The wave was composed of the water that comprises the entire ocean. So we are individual waves on the surface of the reality of God, if that makes sense.
And you would say that God is the ocean?
In this analogy, in that analogy, yeah. God is, is that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to run here soon because I've got my next guest. But Zach, it was awesome having you back. And if you guys, again, want to email Zach, whether you want to ask him questions or ask him about whatever, or get a copy of his version of the Lord's Prayer, it is there for you. And, again, thank you so much for coming back. I'm glad you came. I really like your translation. I think it's fantastic.
Thanks.
And I think the audience likes you too. There's a comment here. I love this guy.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on. And thanks for having me on to begin with. I had a lot of people reach out to me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So,
And
yeah.
and hey, I wish you a lot of success in finishing up your degree.
Thank you very much. Could you do me a favor, please?
Yes, I can.
Have a beautiful night.
Well, we all will. Thank you,
All of
Zach.
you have a great night. Yeah. And
All right, Zach.
take
Thanks
care.
again, buddy. You have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
You too. Bye bye.
Oh, he's gone already. So a big round of applause for Zach. All right, coming up in just a minute is Dr. Toni Riley, and we did a podcast together. And I'm not sure how long ago it was. I'm going to look in here before I introduce her. But we did one we did one before, and I'm going to have to ask her. I don't even remember what number that was. It's been a while. But she's here, and we're going to talk about whatever she likes to talk about. It's great to have her back. And also, real quick, in the description below, there's a lot of links. There's a link to our website. There's a link to our Discord. There's a link to our Facebook page. There's a link to my personal Facebook, profile. You're welcome to friend me. I'm accepting friends till I hit 5,000 friends. And you'll see my last name is Reynolds. Mara is my beloved wife. So for those of you that didn't know, that's who Mara is. That's not my last name. There's links to our other channels, and that's about it, I think, really. So, and I want to say that I'm going to throw in my own little advertisement for tomorrow. I recorded an NDE today with a man that was at a lake, and he was on a slide into the lake, and he didn't know that the lake wasn't deep, and he went down head first on the slide and hit his head into the bottom of the lake and broke his neck, and it was a miracle that he survived. And since his NDE, he used to be a guy in Army Ranger. I guess that might be Special Forces. Now he got into embroidering, and I don't know if that was a download he got or whatever, but he has one of the most amazing tapestries that's still being worked on today. I think his NDE was only in 2020, and we go through his tapestry. And so to me, this is a must-see video if you're into NDEs, and if you see this tapestry, I think you're going to be amazed by it. And so I hope you guys check it out tomorrow night. And all right, with that note, let's bring in Toni and see what she's up to. Be great to see her again. Toni, are you there? Hello? I think her volume's on. I saw it on. Can you hear us? I can hear you clicking. Can you hear me? She must not have her speakers on. I don't think she's hearing us, but I'm hearing her. Do we have our signs anymore? I don't know if we have the right sign for this. But I hear you. You don't hear me. I don't think... There. Penny made us these signs, by the way, for Penny Sutton in there, and she can make you all kinds of cards and stuff. But yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
The weirdest thing is going on.
And we never thought of making a card that says, I can hear you, but you can't hear me. Let me see. Your audio, that is this. Nope. So yes, I can't hear you. Let me see. Let me do a chat with her. If I can send a chat and say, oh, wrong computer. 1 second here.
Oh my goodness.
I can hear you.
Hello.
Oh, you. Maybe she'll see that.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
I cannot hear you. Let me check my. What's going on?
That's okay. Let me see. I hope she can see my
The
chat.
weirdest sound is coming through my earpods.
Maybe your
Wonder if that's
speakers are
working.
not on. Anyway, so you guys get to see what it is like when I do a podcast with
Okay.
guests. Sometimes we got to do a little troubleshooting just to get it to work before we start recording. So this is just like a day in the office
Jeff,
for
give me
me.
a second. I'm going to take these earpods off because
Okay.
they are not working. Oh, I got them. It sounded like there's crazy alien voices in my ears, but that's
Maybe
normal
ETs
now.
are here.
How cute. Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you can hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we could hear you the whole time. I don't know why you couldn't hear us. Just maybe sometime
going,
maybe you needed to go in Zoom and like tell which speakers that were coming out of or something. I don't know. But we got it working so that everything's good. So
Here
it's
we are.
great to see you. Do you remember what podcast number you were?
Oh, I wish I looked it up. I'm thinking maybe 140.
140?
Around there.
Wow.
It was roughly a year ago.
It's got to
I
be
can see
higher
it
than that
celebrate.
because we're at 1,040. So that would have been about 300 back would be, I don't know, 800, 700 and something.
Oh my. I need to look
It's
it
not
up,
it's
don't I?
not
Find
well, it's
out what
not
it
no
was.
it's not important. I got it. Oh, my wife just found it. You were number 713. 11 months
713.
ago.
Okay. Yeah, this
And
time last year, roughly.
all right, and thank you for pulling that up because now I didn't get a
Thanks,
chance.
Mara.
Yeah, she says you're welcome. I didn't get a chance to see what we talked about, but we talked about past life regression, reincarnations, and self-awareness.
Yeah.
So,
We did.
all right. So refresh us and me as well and the audience what you're up to and how you got into all this stuff.
Yeah, so last time we would have talked about past lives. So roughly 20 years ago, I led a very mainstream life. I worked in mainstream work and I became aware of past lives. And I did that because I sought out to develop my intuition. And in that process, the lady who taught me to meditate and to liven up my intuitive senses, she told me to read Many Lives, Many Masters, which is the book by Dr. Brian Weiss.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that book and it set me on an extraordinary path at speed where I thought, wow, this is what I'm here to do. And I became very involved in learning past lives or past life regression. And I almost immediately, as soon as I learned it, started to work with people to take them into their past lives. And before that, actually, my first foray into it was having my own past life session. And it was extraordinary for me. It changed me. And I, for the first time, really actually even became aware that we were more than just this body and here having a life. I hadn't really thought about it much before. Certainly, I hadn't thought about self-awareness either. Been plodding along in my very ordinary mainstream, life. And when I had that past life experience, it was very vivid for me. I could see and feel and know within that session. And of course, the really cool thing is it fixed some issues that I had. And that was what was extraordinary to me. I knew I hadn't made it up.
Would you be willing to share what issues were fixed?
Oh, yes, of course. So there were 3 that I asked about. And can I also admit, prior to this, I didn't even know that I had issues. Of course, I had tons. But as I became aware of them, the first one that I asked about was I could not speak in front of people. It would make me heat up, feel like I'm going to faint. And so that I asked about that. Why can't I speak in front of people? Not that I'd ever really done public speaking or anything. And probably my first thing was when I got married and you had to get up and say thanks to everyone for coming. Oh, it was terrible. But I knew I couldn't speak in front of people. So I asked about that. I asked about why am I in my mid-30s and I'm not aware that I'm intuitive? How can that be? And the third thing I asked about was another issue or maybe phobia that I had, which I went through school covering my writing, and I couldn't bear anyone looking over my shoulder in case they were reading what I was writing. And believe me, I was never ever writing anything exciting. So, so I thought, well, that's weird to have that. So those were the things that I asked about in my past life. And yes, I can happily tell you what I recall.
Well, I'm especially curious, what did you see in a past life that made you anxious about speaking in public?
Yeah. So I saw myself as a man in, oh, first of all, I'll tell you how it came to me. I saw him, his feet, and they had black shoes with a big buckle and those white stockings and knickerbocker trousers that came just below his knees. And he was wearing a kind of a red jacket and he was well fed. I saw that. He was in his early 40s. And I saw that he wrote or I saw myself as him writing in this most beautiful, big book and writing with a quill in the most beautiful handwriting too. But I also knew that I was someone important in my town, maybe the mayor. And what happened was I had called the people to warn them of a storm that I had foreseen coming. A storm, it wasn't even anything outrageous or witchy. But as I called the local townspeople to let them know that we needed to take precautions because I had seen that it was going to flood our little town, our village, and create some havoc. And the people started jeering and yelling, well, how would you know this? And from that, I was basically lost any sense of respect that I had from them. And they then found my book that I had been writing in, and it was full of my premonitions, I suppose you would call them, my musings, my premonitions, and they read them and thought I was nuts. So they locked me up and I died in that cell. And that was it. That's all the information I saw in that first version of that past life. And it made sense as to why I didn't want to speak in front of anybody.
So afterwards, did you immediately just feel comfortable speaking in front of people, or did it take it some time to kind of work itself out?
Okay, that's such a good question. In that instant, it did take a little while because at that stage of my life, I wasn't going out after that session to speak in front of people, but it was at the very start of me working with people with past lives and developing a personal persona, a public persona around the past lives. So it was not long before I did start to speak in front of people at events and write articles for, anyone that would take my articles on. So what I was able to do after that session was write easily and also to be able to speak at those events. And I'm not really a shy person. So it didn't really make sense that I couldn't speak in front of people, not even a couple of people. It was really a real fear. But so yes, it did work. The very first time that I went to speak, I could, with ease. Is almost like that girl, get her off the stage now.
So did you get like Dolores Cannon style regression or just traditional past life regression?
Yes, so traditional, I'm going to call it. Because the lady who regressed me, who was my meditation teacher that told me to read Many Lives, Many Masters, she had a style which she told me she had learned from a Maori woman who taught her. So basically, it was being relaxed, and then I say the person who you're working with, their soul is feeding them information that comes into their vision and or their sensory system. So it's a less clinical way of recalling past lives, but I feel like it's a very fluid way, and it's where one's soul can show to them exactly what's going to be helpful for them for this life.
This was your first time ever getting it done, right?
Yeah.
After it was over, did you have any doubt, like, was this real? Was I just making it up?
I felt like, because I'm very logical, and also I got really emotional in there. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't control it. I also I knew that I was not imagining it, because these images were just, they were dropping in. There wasn't guided visualization. They were just dropping in. And I knew I hadn't made it up or imagined it. So I was instantly assured that it wasn't made up. I knew I hadn't made it up. So, and I think what happened from that is it gave me this unwavering confidence, probably that I needed, that past lives were real and that it wasn't made up. Having said that, many people who have past life regression do think, "Oh, did I just make that up?" But for me, I knew I hadn't.
I had a
So
guest not
yeah.
too long ago, and she said that after her past life regression, she would almost be like nonstop crying for about a week. And after every time she would have that done, she has to kind of prepare for that.
Oh, I know that. I think because it gets to the very core of what's going on in an individual's life. And I also have experienced that. I didn't in my first experience of it, but there are other times where, in fact, in my training, where I also couldn't stop crying for about a week. I think it really hit deep and kind of set off a bit of a self realization that was a bit triggering, I suppose, where I'd realized for those 35 or 36 years, um, I'd kind of been in the dark. And I also had been through, I had left my marriage at the time that I learned past life regression and had my first experience. So I was very riddled with guilt and a lot of personal experiences or trauma around that. So it was, those tears that came were almost this massive reflection of of life, but also that it had been planned, and I knew, my soul knew that I was coming to do that. So yeah, there was just a lot going on. So I can recognize that some people do have a big emotional experience or clearing after.
Do you think that's releasing lifetimes of pain and suffering?
Yeah, I do. I think it's I think it's really now, actually. I feel like when people have their past life, they see what they see, and in the past life there's a way where you're looking at it from a higher perspective. But when you come back into life as we are, whomever we are now, the reality sets in for our life circumstances, what we've endured, or whether they're really positive or negative things. And this reality comes in, and we're very emotional in this life. So I think it's certainly an emotional release for mostly for this life that we're living now.
Wow. Well, it's been a year basically since I've seen you. I think you have do you have any new information to share with us, or what's going on lately?
I really would love to talk about because I know that your show was centered very much around NDEs. So I'd love to talk a little bit about the fact that, and you also mentioned Dolores Cannon. I have not read Dolores's stuff, but of course I'm familiar with her work. And through my work over the last nearly 20 years, people would go, we started with past life regression, but then you would go in between lives, and I would have months of people just going in there. So I got to research all of these areas. But what I came to know is these near-death experiences that people have, the way I see it is each time someone has one of them, it's a spontaneous thing, and it's very personal to them, and it's somehow relative to their life now, and it most certainly affects their purpose in life because it sends them on a different trajectory to where they were before it. And when people go in between lives, a very similar thing, if not the same thing, happens. Of course, it's individual, so slightly different per person, but the basis of it and the feeling that people get there is the same. And it's the same as what people describe when they have an NDE. So the way I see these in between life exploration or visits is they are a facilitated NDE. So you don't have to nearly die. And I feel like it's actually somewhat more powerful than going into a past life, but they both have a different outcome for an individual, whether they go past lives or in between lives.
So you think that a in-between life regression is more valuable than a past life regression? Because it seems like they would kind of offer different types of information.
They most certainly offer different types of information and different types of always healing. I always believe that people come out of either of those different, come out a little changed. Their perspective will be different. But the in-between life space it's very all-encompassing. And I think what most definitely happens there is people get to experience that feeling of, I call it everything but nothing, but it's so peaceful and so loving and kind of this oneness. So, and when people feel that for themselves, they come back with a knowing that probably no one can take away from them because it defies logic and it defies science. Yeah.
I have a question for you here real quick from the chat, and if anybody else has a chat, feel free to write them. And it says, could we please ask the guest's background so we can get some context of where her life story comes from?
Oh my goodness, my background. Okay. So I always describe my background as very mainstream. So I did write my book about this actually, so that it defines how our life purpose is basically every moment of every day. It plays out through our life. So my background is in administration, from a work perspective, administration, and I used to program software. So from there, in my middle 30s, I became hyper interested in intuition and I guess the psychic senses, mainly because I was told that I had these abilities and I didn't know what they were. I didn't understand them. So I basically went from knowing nothing to opening up to this world of, I guess, realizing that there's a soul in this other area that we had the ability to connect with, our own soul energy, which comes in the form of our intuition and being able to listen to what's coming up for ourselves. And then, of course, because I was introduced to the past life realms through that Dr. Brian Weiss book, and had my own experiences in those past lives and in the between life stage. And those transcendent experiences kind of opened this, I call it a stream. I think it opened my stream of consciousness to be receiving information and to be able to follow what I was directed as my mission, which I was told was to bring past lives and reincarnation into mainstream. So back in the days when I started, nearly 20 years ago, there were actually a lot of people already working in those realms. I just wasn't aware of it. But at that time, it was very new agey. it was very new agey. So of course there were psychics and mediums and all of those kinds of things, and they were the people that potentially believed in past lives. But I was told that the mission was to bring this information into a more mainstream reality. And yes, so my background is basically following the stream that came to me. I didn't research what anyone else was doing. It came through my stream. I did read Brian Weiss's book and I went to his training as well, which was a magical blessing for me. So through that, I came to write what I was calling a new psychology, but it's a spiritual psychology. It's taken nearly 20 years to write that and teach it and practice it with a lot of people. So, yeah, so my background is basically on the job learning.
Is your book called Awake?
Yeah,
Okay.
the purpose of life and why you're here. Yes.
All right. I thought you just said you had an. Are you writing another book? Because it sounded like you just mentioned a different book.
No, that's the book, Awake, the Purpose of Life and Why You're Here. But I'm writing many things, and I am in the process of writing a book so that people can experience past life regression for themselves or even facilitate it for others themselves. It's really not rocket science, and it's a beautiful thing. So yes, there's many things that
Oh, that's great.
that I can write about and share.
Well, is there a meditation or something that we can listen to on YouTube to help us facilitate that?
Yeah, there is. So there's a free one on my YouTube channel, which is at Dr. Toni Riley. That's the handle. So it should be easy to find on there, meditation to recall your past lives. And yeah, that's on there. And I also have a big set of meditations that can be streamed and take you in between lives, and also with instructions so that you're comfortable with what might happen. And yeah, a guide if you want to before you do the guided meditation.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So you're into the in between life regressions. What else do you got going on?
Yeah. So the other thing that I think that this work or this mission is very much about, well, helping people. But the way I see it is helping people to help themselves is the ultimate, because I think that, or I believe that we can only change the world or even change anything one person at a time. So starting with ourselves. And that way, if people can get really trusting of being able to connect with their soul, trusting their intuition, then they can, if they choose to, learn to meditate or trust what comes to them in meditation or just spontaneously to make their own life better. So I feel like if we can help people to trust in these realms and trust in themselves, then that's going to be a big leap forward for, I guess, humanity as a whole, because it's becoming very, very, I think, mainstream, but very, very popular now, as it's meant to at this trajectory of humanity.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question, and you may not actually ever get into this, but I'm going to ask anyways because other regressionists, especially Dolores Cannon, does. Do you ever get into anything with ETs during past life or in between life regressions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was never my specialty, because I think I was to specialize in the past lives and the between lives and the afterlife. But yes, over the years, many people recall lives in other places other than Earth. And the thing that's really exciting to me about ETs or other realms, personally, I always believed in them without really any evidence. To me, it's just true. But when people recall them, they've come for past lives, it was really exciting to me because they were usually as shocked to see it as perhaps anyone else would have been. And when that happens, you know that they're not fooling themselves or having themselves on. So, yeah, they definitely go to all sorts of other places.
Can you share with us some of the most surprising things that you have heard? Shocking for you that you're like, wow, I didn't even know this existed.
The ones in, can I say, interestingly, we always ask them where they are, or I always ask them where they are, and they don't ever usually say the ones that we know of, such as Atlantis or Lemurian. They don't say that. They'll say maybe either they don't know or they describe it differently. So I'm not saying it wasn't those places because it sounds like what we know of those places, but they'll usually say in other spaces that it's much more energetic. The people don't look like us, so they're not as human form. They might even look like have different kinds of heads and maybe bodies that are very different proportions to ours. But usually they'll say that it's calm, peaceful, and lovely compared to Earth, and that they speak through telepathy. Gosh, what else have I heard? I've heard a lot of people, no, I say a lot, a few people in my realms have gone where they call themselves the blue people. And which I found really interesting because they had a run of people saying they were the blue people. Um, but always those realms seem to be, I don't know, calm and peaceful compared to here, which is lovely. I think probably the things that I've heard that are shocking per se, none of those places shock me. They're lovely. But I think probably some of the things that shock me, not even shock me, but excite me, are when they recall a past life. Someone who's very logical comes in for regression, maybe even forced by someone to come. Like their partner might be like, we want you to go and have this. And they relent, come and have a session. And what transpires is something that what I describe as prolific, so they can recall easily and they come up with a past life that's very detailed. And then they go away, I think mainly because they're shocked at what they've seen and not familiar with the history of what they've seen. So they'll go across or go away and Google. Of course, we have Google now. Google's our friend, and see that what they had recalled is actually written in history. And they're as surprised as we are, and it's just awesome. So that's what excites me. Maybe not shocks me. I'm trying to think of what wouldn't shock me because you hear so many things in these realms. I think people are really vulnerable in these realms as well, and they feel like they can relay what's happening. Yeah.
I think I have a question here. 1 second from the audience. Ask her that the void. Maybe what is the void in meditation? I'm not sure if I'm reading it correctly. Does that make any sense
What
for
is
you?
the void?
Or I guess maybe you get some kind of void in meditation.
Oh my goodness, I'm not sure if they mean a space that we go into and it feels wonderful, or if they mean void as in nothing's coming through to them. So it'd be interesting to know what they actually mean by that
Is it? Let me ask you
definition.
Let me ask you this. I think people are doing these regressions over Zoom now, especially
Yes,
since
yes.
COVID. Does that really work? I mean, doing it through Zoom, or do you feel like you really need to be in the room with somebody?
No, it works over Zoom, and it works as powerfully as if you're in person. So don't be discouraged if you can only access it through Zoom. It truly does work. Just the same. Energy has no boundaries. So yeah, it's good. Zoom works.
how long does it take you to get someone relaxed enough where they can enter the regression or enter their past life? Does it take an hour, or is there any usual amount of time?
In the way that I facilitate, it can be as quickly as they go in, I'm going to say between 5 to 8 minutes. It's not very long. And so a whole session, which can even involve more than one life, exploring more than one life, can be done in an hour. So yeah, it doesn't need to take very long. I don't know if that's because the energy of the universal energy is allowing that to be the case these days. But for me, in the whole time that I've been doing this, it's never taken very long, except if we have someone who's extremely logical and kind of not giving up to the relaxation, then it just takes a little longer. But when I say a little longer, it probably takes, 15 or 20 minutes to get them really relaxed. Yeah.
All right. Let me check here and see if we have any more questions for you. Oh, well, there's a nice compliment. You're such a beautiful light. Another nice compliment. Lovely guest, very sweet and genuine in her explanations or explorations.
Oh, thank you. Sweet.
So, are you doing anything else besides providing that service of regression therapy?
Oh, I am working with regressing people these days at the moment, but my big passion is to teach people to learn either past life regression, which includes learning to facilitate going in between lives as well, and to take people into the afterlife to visit with a passed over loved one. We can facilitate that as well, and I like to teach people how to do that. And also we have the course that I developed, which is, I call it a spiritual psychology, but it's called Soul Life Coaching. I put most of my energy into teaching people that to certify them.
So are you saying
And yeah,
saying that it's easy for a person to do their own past life regression to themselves, and you can teach them to do that?
yes, actually two things. I can teach them to facilitate it for other people. They would get certified to do that. And I can teach them to recall their past lives themselves. So they're really comfortable with it. Yeah.
Mm, wow.
Either way, have workshops. Yeah, it's great.
Michael Vess is saying, "You're amazing. I love you." So usually when you're, I don't know if you'd call it a client or a patient or what, but when you're with somebody, it only takes about an hour to do a whole session.
Yeah,
That's quick. I thought it
yeah.
took like 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, I know. I know in the Michael Newton in between lives training, I think he calls it life between life. I know that they used to train their people, perhaps they still do, and they would do it for hours. But whenever I've been doing this, it's very easily done within an hour. And I think when you cap it into an hour, then the person can process kind of one thing at a time. If I had them in there for hours, they would get a real lot of. It'd probably go to many, many past lives. But yeah, I feel like usually also they are told that that's enough.
Mhm.
That's enough, and there's more, but that's enough for now. That kind of thing. But yeah, an hour. Get a lot in an hour.
I think some people will say that we're not supposed to be doing past life regressions. We're not supposed to be finding out about that information. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I feel like um, I feel like there's a misconception where when people who feel like that about it is, I think that they think that it's dredging up the past. But what happens with past life regression is it's always recalling something that will help to make this life better. So it's not about dwelling in the past. It's about bringing some information through now to heal something that's happening now, or to help the person understand their circumstances now. And it's completely always, I'm going to say, enlightening, and they always feel lighter no matter what they see in the past life.
Here's a question. How many past lives do people typically have?
This is a bit, I guess, ambiguous, but potentially hundreds, potentially even way more than that. But what happens when you take people into past life regression, or they spontaneously recall them, or they recall them themselves, it doesn't matter how, we seem to only be given access, I'll say, to the ones that are relative to our life now, to us now, for our mission now, to our purpose now. So we might have had hundreds of them, but we might only ever see, I don't know, 1 or 6 or 12, depending what's going on.
What do you think about this? Some guests will talk about that all of our past lives, including this one, are all happening at the same time. Do you believe that is true? And if so, how does that affect the regression?
Yeah, look, I don't know if everything's happening at once. To me, it seems like that is very probable. But because when we're working in past lives as this person, or as people that are leading life in this century now, to me, we're working in linear time now, and we know about history in terms of linear time. So when people recall past lives, they will absolutely be within the history that we know of, and not all discombobulated and happening all at once. So it seems to have, I think it's so we as humans can make sense of it and incorporate it into this life. Sometimes I think when we get all caught up in that everything's happening at all at once, and it's all oh gosh, what do they say? They say all sorts of things. But anyway, that it's all happening at once. I think it's getting a little bit far away from real life, which we are here having a human experience. And I really like for us to enjoy that. And of course, some people are super interested in what's going to happen to them next time. But I feel like enjoy now. And maybe it's all happening at once. But for us now, we're living this life.
Here's a couple questions. One is, can our dream content be influenced by our past lives?
Yeah, absolutely. So past life dreams are slightly different to when we're having a dream that I describe as being a message from our subconscious. Well, you know, when you have a dream that's kind of so real, but it doesn't really make sense, metaphorical type message for us. But with past life dreams, they're literal, and they will run along in some sort of sequence that you'll be able to understand that it is most likely past life. And I think what happens with the past life dreams is people are given that information. So either they have to delve further, or it's to spontaneously give them information for now.
Have you ever regressed somebody into a future life?
Yes. Yes. So because the context of my work, it was about healing. So what we found was some people are allowed to have I'm going to say allowed. I think if their soul allows them to see it, then they're allowed to see the future. But you can certainly facilitate asking, and if they're allowed to see the future, they do. I know I saw into the future in my Brian Weiss training, actually. So it's possible. And I mean, I guess that assures us that things are happening all at once to an extent, doesn't it? Because you can see things that haven't happened yet. Yeah.
How many regressions did you have to perform on other people until you felt like you were very competent at doing it?
I love that question. I've never been asked that. Um, when I did my training, my first training, which was before the Brian Weiss training, what we did was there were just three, myself and two other girls in the training, and the lady that trained us. And what she did was she put one of us on the couch and she would regress myself, and those other girls would watch. And then we would work through, and she would just, for a couple of days, regress each one of us, one after the other, and we would observe. So after 2 days of observing the three of us either having our past lives recalled or them recalling theirs, when I left after those 2 days, I already felt really competent and comfortable with the process and with how to facilitate it. So I can only say that, knowing now how serendipity takes over and synchronicity happens, it was the mission, and it played out for me with ease, because that's what happened. It was like a few weeks ago, you're living a different life, and then suddenly this compulsion opens up to learn, and I felt completely comfortable and confident. Yeah.
Have you, over time, have you taken what you have learned on how to regress somebody and modified it, and in your opinion, improved the technique?
Yes, I would definitely say I've made tweaks to it and improved it, but by and large, it's it's really, I guess, quite similar to when I first learned it. It's really simple and more about how you ask them, because we never want to lead them in past life regression. We want our client or patient to recall it for themselves. So when we're facilitating it, we're really careful not to lead them or suggest what might be going on for them. So, yeah, in the way that we question them and in the way that we teach the facilitators to question and guide is, we've tweaked that over the times. And also, at the end of the lifetime, every past life, the most important place is the death scene, and then what transpires after the death scene. Because in that space, that person is directly in communication with their soul energy. So it's almost, if they don't go in between lives, they're still talking to that higher self, their soul. So, facilitating to get them into that space is really key. It's where the healing happens, actually.
Have you ever regressed somebody and the pet that they have now was also with them in a previous life?
Yes, yes. People, various people over the years have recognized, well, they recall a life and there's an animal in it, or a dog in this case, and they recognize it as their pet now. And it's really, makes them really emotional. And yeah, I don't question what anyone recalls. It's like it's all very valid to them. And yeah, it's lovely. So yep.
Have you ever had a client that right after their past life, they said, I don't know what they were, what I saw, it doesn't make any sense to me. And then maybe a couple weeks later, it all makes sense. And they call you back and said, now I know what I saw.
Oh, usually in the way that I facilitate it, they don't come out not knowing what was happening and why they were presented with that particular past life and the information. So we'll talk, if we haven't established it within the past life session, we'll have a discussion about it afterwards. And usually with a little discussion, and I'll know what to ask them, they will be able to assimilate how it fits into their life now, and it will make sense to them.
Have you seen any patterns? Like if a person has a certain phobia, it usually means that in a previous life, such and such has happened.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you give us some
Definitely.
examples?
yeah. Oh, some people who come for past life regression might have the strangest phobias, and sometimes they don't come along asking for the phobia, but they're presented with a past life that they're like, whoa, that explains this fear that I have. Okay, so gosh, now I have to think of one. Okay, I'm going to go out there with the first one that's coming to me, but one fellow saw himself, it sounds so gruesome, I'm sorry, but he saw himself in a medieval time, and he had been tortured. He was being tortured, and they were placing heated poker stick from the fire into him, and it into his anus, actually. Sorry, but that's the one that's coming to me. And when he came out of it, he said that he had an extreme issue with anything coming anywhere near that area on him. And yes, but he didn't come along asking for that. But that's just one phobia that's coming to me. But I guess it would be fair to say that a lot of people have quite traditional phobias, such as flying or heights, claustrophobia, where they're afraid of small spaces. And those kind of phobias, fear of snakes, these kinds of things are really quite common, where you see things that happened in a past life presented to them so that they can see why these things are affecting them now. And it usually fixes it when they see, yeah.
Like, for example, what is a common past life that causes someone to have fear of heights?
Okay, so it can be something like they've been in a plane and it crashes. It can be something like that. And gosh, what else? They may fall from somewhere, fall from a high place, and it kills them. Usually the phobia is because they die from it, and there's fear in the lead up to dying. So yeah, a crash, falling from a high space, being pushed from a high place. Even as I'm going to say, even as a caveman, people go back to that far sometimes in their past lives, and they might see where they might have been trying to get away from an animal, and they've fallen off a high rock or something, and yeah, it gives them a fear of heights. So yeah.
Would you say that, I mean, you mentioned a plane crash as a fear of heights, but what about people with fear of flying? Is it being in a previous plane crash or something else?
Usually, if they're specifically afraid of flying, what they'll see is maybe a plane crash, or maybe that has affected them through their life. So maybe a partner's been in a crash, or something like that's happened around them and put this real fear into them. So, but it doesn't have to be, it would seem that if they're afraid of heights, that it's obvious that they may have been in a plane crash. Sorry, if they're afraid of flying, but it's not always that. It might be something else that they're shown that gives them that fear, and it might just be of being where they've been enclosed. That makes sense, that they don't want to go into this plane and be enclosed in somewhere that they can't get out of. And sometimes, to give some context, what they might find, or I'm just thinking of some of the things that people see, but sometimes they might have been in a snowstorm, for example, and they take cover in like a kind of a cavey space, but yet the snow locks them in and they die in there. So those are the kinds of things that give people, or that they see in past lives, that this fear arises from.
All right, I got a bunch
These
of
kinds of
questions for you. I got to catch up. I got a bunch of questions for you.
Okay.
Do many past lives reveal patterns in relationships over and over?
They do. They do. And I think with relationships, they're our biggest teacher in our lives, what we learn from our relationships. So I think that as people, it can be really difficult to see the patterns. So what happens when people come along and they experience a past life, they'll see something where they've done something similar before, and it helps them to understand the pattern now. Or, for example, if they experience, I'm going to say abandonment or those types of things which show up within our relationships, they might see where that fear comes from before, or where the person that they're with now that triggers that fear in them, where that comes from, and maybe they even see where they've been in a lifetime with that soul before, who they're in a relationship now, and it helps them understand the pattern and realize why the fear is there for them. And it's usually results in something very positive happening for them after that. Yeah.
Is it true that birthmarks are wounds received in a past life?
Yeah. Birthmarks are really, I'll go so far as to say, if anyone has a birthmark and they regressed, they would be able to find the wound that caused it in a past life. So every time that I've ever regressed, want someone to look for it, or even if they haven't regressed looking for their birthmark, they might come out and they've seen where a wound has taken place, or they've died by a wound that's killed them. They will often come out and say, I've got a scar there, or I've got a birthmark there. And so it's really almost always, if I've ever seen a birthmark or where they've recalled it, they find where it was caused, or if they've got a birthmark and saw a wound, they can associate it with their birthmark.
Why do you think
Yeah.
it carries over into this life as a birthmark?
I love this question. I truly believe that it happens so that people at this time in the evolution of humanity maybe question it, or maybe just ask, and it makes them realize potentially reincarnation is real. I truly believe that there's not that much more of a reason for it than to help people realize that there's more, that reincarnation is real.
All right.
Yeah.
Can you give us examples of supernatural experiences you have had doing this work?
Oh, okay. Can I tell you, when I do past life regression, it's very, um, uh, I'm going to call it practical. It's a transcendent experience for the person, but usually anything paranormal, or what did you say? Paranormal?
I think so. Paranormal or supernatural.
Supernatural. Supernatural. I guess it depends what they mean by supernatural. To me, I think the supernatural would be more when they go in between lives,
Mhm.
and see, energies that aren't really in a human form, and they have a sensation from them or a feeling from them. But I think supernatural to me, potentially, when you see a presence or a person who's a spirit, but you see them with your open eyes, that kind of thing, and you see things moving on. There's a lot of that in my life, but it's not to do with past lives per se. But I do believe that energy or spirit energy can come and show itself to us and move things, come in our dreams. There's been lots of it. I've seen people with my open eyes, um, done extensive mediumship training actually. But to see with your open eyes, I think a lot of people can, but I couldn't. I can see it in here, but to see someone beside your bed with your open eyes is really, I really appreciated being able to see that. So a few times I've seen people I didn't know standing there almost as dense as we are. Yeah.
All right. Is there any danger in doing a past life regression?
Personally, I don't think so. I feel like our soul is in charge of the information that we as an individual receive. And because that's the case, then when anyone's recalling a past life, they're given what they can handle or what they need to know or the context that they need it in. So I feel like it's always with most positive intent for the person who's recalling their past life.
Have you ever regressed somebody and they didn't have a past life because they are a brand new soul?
um, I feel like, okay, I'm going to say once or twice I've had people say that to me. Oh, nothing's coming to me. Um, it's my first time here, and all I can say is, who am I to question that? But that is so rare. And when you go beyond the past lives into the between lives realms, the thing that we know is that our soul is really all the same energy. So to an extent, we've all been in some sort of human or other planetary form where we've incarnated. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. When doing past life regression, is the focus on the moment of death?
Um, Focusing on the moment of death is super important because it's where they get to communicate with their soul, and it's also where every person who has a past life regression will realize that we are immortal. But it's not it's not the only most important part, because when people go through the elements within the past life, it can be how they understand their relationship, or they understand a health uh, issue that they have now, or a physical symptom that they have, or even a psychological symptom that they have. So yes, it's super important, but the whole thing has an importance, the whole past life recall.
All right. Have you had anything interesting happen in the room when you're doing hypnosis? Like you're there with a person and maybe beings come or whatever?
um, Look, I'm going to say when I do the past life session, and either in person or even on Zoom, I get so in the zone with that person that I'm really not aware of anything that's going on around. So I haven't really noticed beings or other energies in the space. But I can tell you this, when you're working with them, the energy is strong and stronger. So, yeah.
Okay. Um, all right. Is a past life regression deeper than regular hypnosis?
Um, the depths that people go into can be individual, though you don't need to be that deep to recall past lives. In fact, not when we're regressing them, but when people recall past lives spontaneously, sometimes they're literally here with their eyes open, and it's all going on very vividly for them. So you don't really have to be that deep
Have you
to
ever
recall past life.
during a regression had a client or a person say, I can't take anymore and have to stop? Like I can't see anymore, it's
No,
too traumatic or
no.
anything.
Oh, there's times when what people are recalling is quite hectic, but what we know is, as a facilitator, is that if you're being shown it in your past life, it's so important that we find out what happened and why. So what we would do as a facilitator is to assure them that it's really important that we find out what happens, because if we were to come out and they're feeling that way about it because they're judging it as the person that they are now, what they're seeing, if we leave it at that, then they will come out and be wondering why what they saw, maybe they've done something terrible or had something terrible done to them. So we would always, and you can do it, just work with them and be very reassuring. It's like really important we find out. The key is to find out, why did it happen? Why did you have to experience that? And what was the purpose of it? And when they find that out, the healing happens.
Do you think that once they experience a certain memory from a past life, that memory kind of dissolves in a way, like they've re-experienced it, and now, I mean, it's something happens to the memory where, obviously it doesn't have any effect on them, but it's like the memory is now even harder to reach because it's kind of been resolved.
I would say it's potentially the opposite to that. When someone recalls a past life, even when they have a great healing from it, which is almost always the case, it stays vivid for them, or certainly portions of it stay quite vivid for them, rather than they completely forget about it. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's almost time to go, but before I go, what someone have asked is that they would like you to join my Discord. Do you know what Discord is?
No.
Discord is kind of like Facebook, but different, and it's free to have. I have a Discord, and anybody can join it. It's a place where I have a bunch of chat rooms, and you can not only chat, you can post stuff, you can video chat, you can audio chat, and I have a bunch of rooms. I don't know, there's 500 to 600 members there, and it's kind of like a great place for people to hang out with like-minded people and like I said, hang out and chat or do whatever. So someone's asked if you would join. So what you do for you and anybody else is, once you join and set up a profile, like I said, it's free. Just email me and I will give you the password to get in, because I used to have it public, but people were going in and harassing people. So I don't have the password public anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So anyways,
okay,
all right.
I'll get on there.
Yeah. Well, Toni, it was great seeing you again. It was good hanging out with you. And if you want to know more about Toni, in the description, I put a link to her website. I put a link to her YouTube channel and more. So, hopefully you will be able to find her if you want to.
Oh, Jeff, would you mind if I just say this one thing? On the YouTube channel, in about 2 weeks' time, we're going to have clients on there where we'll have them describing what happened in their past life and what it helped them with.
Oh, cool.
So if anyone's interested in that,
it's like testimonials.
Thank you for having me. Kind of, yeah. So they can describe their experience.
Would you ever would you ever record one of your sessions and put it up there? That would be interesting.
I have thousands of those.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, then there you have it. So she's got thousands of those up there. Great.
No, they're not up there, but I have them.
Oh, okay. Well, would you ever consider posting them? All right, great. Yes. Well, Toni, it was so great seeing you. Thanks for coming. I'm so glad you checked in, and don't be a stranger.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, I'll see you around.
Thanks, Mara. Bye.
She says thank you. Bye-bye. All right, that was Toni, and that was another cool Saturday. Man, we had a good Wait, let me give her a round of applause before we go. And we had a really excellent show tonight. It was great. So, again, I want to let you guys know that tomorrow night, in my opinion, is a must-see NDE. This former soldier was at the lake. He was going down a water slide, and he didn't know that the lake was shallow. He went headfirst into the bottom of the lake, broke his neck, and had an NDE. And since his NDE, he started embroidering this tapestry, and the tapestry is amazing. So not only do you get to hear his NDE, but you get to see this tapestry. So I hope you guys come and check it out. And on that note, I think this Saturday, the new format for Saturday nights is working out. I've already got people scheduled for next week, which is great. So I'm kind of picking up people that are, that's kind of working it out. And let me just see also before I go real quick, what's going to be coming up. I know I have that NDE. I have another NDE recorded. I've got to get to you guys. I had a really good video with a woman that's a hospice nurse that we talked about shared death experiences and near-death awareness. So there's something in between those that you'll get to hear about. And let's see. I've got this week one. I know I've got two, at least one NDE coming up. I've got Father Nathan Castle, which I'm going to record with on Wednesday, and I've had him twice, and we'll see what he's up to now. And he's a priest that helps people on the other side. And I've got a guy tomorrow, Chris Rael, which I think is going to be presenting at the Conscious Life Expo, and I got him on tomorrow to record. So I think we have some really fascinating guests for you guys showing up soon. So on that note, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with us. You know that we appreciate and love you guys. So have a great rest of your weekend. God bless.